Hey everybody, I've got Scott Nimrod here. He's one of my first followers on my channel when I was under 100 subscribers, and I'm really thankful he's here to talk to us today. So I want to open it up to him, and we can just kind of get started talking about some issues that I think will probably be really applicable to a lot of you out there. So go ahead, Scott.
How you doing, Jamie?
Hey, man.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm always consuming content. Like I'm just addicted to just educating myself. And I came across some of your YouTube videos because I go to YouTube religiously in the morning and even during my commute. And what I found was very interesting and special about the content that you provide is that you're less focused on like hipster technologies, and you're more focused on the human factor of building software. Maybe human/political, right? And
That's probably pretty accurate, yeah.
And that's the thing that I've been really battling since I started making money.
For sure.
Like it didn't. Some of these issues that I vent about via commenting on your YouTube channel and also me venting on Twitter and LinkedIn. Right. A lot of this didn't occur until I leveled up and achieved title of senior developer.
Sure.
And then lead developer, and then architect.
Of course.
And all of a sudden, I realized that the 3 years I did 6 years altogether, 3 years of community college, another 3 at the university.
Okay.
There was something that they didn't really either teach me or I must have been asleep, because there's definitely like a human factor. There's I think every software developer with a college education should minor in political science, right?
It's not a bad idea. It's not a bad idea.
And so basically what I would like to discuss is the pressure that as a consultant, I think you work as a consultant or you have worked as a consultant, the pressure of being like a high-end consultant and the expectation of senior management expecting you to come in, walk on water.
Right.
And all their problems, it just fades away, right?
That'd be nice. Yeah.
This is what and I'm sure many people build ourselves up to so we could be problem solvers, right?
Right.
I would like to say that we take our career personal. The emphasis on career, not job, and the fact that it's personal is something that I keep running into. Not all the time, just 90% of the time is senior management says one thing, and they will say that they have my back. And if people aren't down with their agenda and them putting me into a space where I assume authority to help, if their employees are not willing to get with the program, then their employees are going to be out of here. I've received that speech so many times, and almost every single time, those employees call their bluff. There's still a business that needs to be run, and there's still domain knowledge that cannot leave, at least not voluntarily. So something I want to discuss is, well, what do you advise for developers, regardless of age, that have built themselves up to a certain level of expertise, but it's kind of a conflict of interest where they want to go in, management says one thing, but regardless of the verbal buy-in of the people that you have to work with, the foot soldiers, they don't support you. And in fact, you find yourself trying to walk on water, deliver value as soon as possible, right? Because that's what your bill rate is every time you send that invoice.
Right.
But at the same time, you can't make the type of progress that you would like because the employees they're either being passive aggressive or they're just resisting what needs to
Sure.
be done, or what you believe needs to be done.
Sure.
That's it.
Sure. No, that's a great way to open it up. I mean, I think it's really cool that you just started into this talking about, as you progressed into more of a senior developer role, probably a while ago for you now, you started seeing this stuff. This was the reason, well, not the reason, but one of the reasons I thought that this YouTube channel would be useful is there's a lot of channels out there that I think are really helpful for people starting out. But, software developers, at least the average, I think I've heard they only work for, on average, like 7 years before either going into management or switching careers. And so, I think there's a real need for more tools and just talking about, like, what is it like, just like you were talking about, when you're past that sort of junior developer role and you're now dealing with the politics and all that. And I mean, I can think of so many projects I've been on where I've ran into exactly what you're talking about, where, the management brings you in, they tell you, hey, this is really important to us. I've got support from my boss and everybody else, and I've already cleared this with everybody. But, my experience has been, I'm guessing yours has too, from what you're saying, they may think they have buy-in from people, but I've told my boss at times, sure, I support you on that, and kind of secretly I'm like, I support you on it, but I'm not really thrilled about it, right? So I mean, I think sometimes that's what's going on is, and one of the clients from last year, it was this exact situation where there was a woman and a man that both were not real thrilled about me being there, and I think I ended up spending more time winning their trust, even though that's not what management brought me in there for, right? They wanted me to, just like you said, deliver results. We're paying you. We want you to get this, product built at that point. I knew better that, like, well, hey, you may want, it may be your will to just bring me in, and I'm going to, all of a sudden just start getting everybody to work together and crank on stuff. But, like, people don't, I think, trust you when you're new, no matter what your title is and how much money you make. They have to feel like you care about them first. And man, I never did this stuff earlier in my career. I was a complete jerk. Like, I would come in and I was like, I'm going to show you all how bad you suck. Like, I would basically just look at, like, okay, your continuous integration doesn't work right. You don't, your production environment isn't being deployed to you right. You're not testing enough, and the management would look at it like, oh, cool, this guy, just came in and identified all these issues. But then it's like, now I got to get something built. And unless it's just me, I'm screwed now, because I've got all these other people at the company that, like, they can't just be, essentially dead weight or, sticks in the mud, the expression, if I'm going to actually get stuff done. So it's hard, man. It's so hard. Like, I've just had to be, and I'm not saying I'm great at this, I've had to get a lot more patient over the years where, I just have to accept, like, I'm not going to maybe be able to deliver to the speed that management thought I was coming in. And then it becomes about, and I've talked about this in some of the other videos, but I'm sure we'll talk about it more in the future, resetting expectations on the job. Like, you brought me in to do this kind of work, but now that I'm here, I've realized I can't do the work that way for you because of your environment, and how people are. I don't know. It's just something to think about, I guess.
Yeah, it's something that, again, like, I would think I have enough experience to get over, but one thing that I noticed is, one of my mentors told me, like, you can't save a world that doesn't want to be saved. You know what I mean?
That's a great little tidbit. It really is. I mean, it's easy to say, right? But to live it, man,
Yeah. So I just find myself repeatedly seeing the same scenarios. Like, maybe this is one that you can relate to, right?
Okay.
How many times have you been brought in to help rescue a project?
Ugh. I was just a firefighter. That's literally at my last job when I was a full-time consultant at the agency I was at. The last 2 years, that's what drove me nuts and made me leave there eventually, was I literally was like, every project was a fire that they put me on. I mean, every single one. And I just was like, I can't do this anymore. Yeah.
And so the worst is like, lately I've been like, I might go scatterbrain right here, but I've been like watching a lot of like historical documentaries on like Lamborghini and all these like brand name like builders,
Cool.
towards the automotive industry. And there's a reason why I bring that up, because for whatever reason, they have an established brand of being high end.
Sure.
And they're not going, to the best of my knowledge, I could be wrong, they're not just going to throw some nuts and bolts on the car and know good and well that it has been thoroughly tested for durability, reliability, all the other stuff,
For sure.
and keep it going. No, they it's kind of like they're craftsmen. Even if they're on the assembly line, hence I think some of this is handcrafted, where like they really care about their name being attached. Okay. Every time I check in code, okay, regardless of what source control technology is being used, Scott Nimrod, that's my brand, right? Every time I attach my name to that file and check it in, I want to be proud of it, right? And
Sure.
so there's certain things where like, I know I'm going scatterbrain right now,
No,
but
go for it, dude.
I feel as if they're paying me all this money because I'm trying to demonstrate a brand of mine, of hopefully, some of the development community, when they hear Scott Nimrod, they automatically think F#, WPF, Xamarin, and test automation, right? With emphasis on test automation. I get brought into these companies and I'm very huge on test automation, and they tell me they need help with it. We could do better. We would love to use your skill set. And when I finally enter these companies, well, they listen to their employees and they don't have time to put in the proper checks and balances. They don't have time to have an automated checklist, hence unit tests. And so I question, like, kind of like everybody else that maybe hits their 7th year, did I overstay my welcome? Maybe I should have never hit the title of senior developer. Life was so much easier when I was first a co-op,
For sure.
and then an associate engineer. Like I just feel like I have way too much responsibility, and yet no one is listening to me. I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, well, something you made me think about, and this is just a theory. A lot of the stuff I share on my channel, it's hard because I've worked with a lot of companies on a lot of projects, but it's still not like I'm an academic where I'm going out there surveying like thousands of companies. And the tough thing I think in software development in some ways is because a lot of these companies are private, they don't want people to know like how the sausage is made, right? It's kind of like, you work at a company, you know the internals, but if you want to figure out what other companies are doing, well, you got to just go work there. But what you were making me think about was, my first job right out of college, and I've talked about this in other videos, I was working at a software company that was a subsidiary of a really big manufacturing company. And the culture at that software company, even though they were building software, because a lot of them were like mechanical engineers and electrical engineers, even though they were developers, they knew if we introduce a flaw into a physical system on the factory floor, there could be, just like we hear about this in the news, right? A recall of like a motorcycle or a car, and that can cost the company millions of dollars, and they've experienced that before. The kind of theory I have is, technology companies at least, and I know, depending on the company you work at, software might not be their primary way of making money, but technology companies, they seem to be so shorter cycle with their products these days. Like they'll build a product and it'll be like the greatest thing since sliced bread, and everybody's excited and they throw a bunch of money on it and they use the latest frameworks, and maybe they bring in, top talent and build that thing for 2 to 5 years. And then it's like everybody's like, we don't care about that product. We're on like the brand new hotness, right? And so, this is going to depend a lot, right, based on the company and their culture and their product life cycles. But it seems like there's so much turnaround in the tech industry. People come in, they're even product managers a lot of times. They'll come in, they're only there for 2 to 3 years, and they either get fired because they had a release that didn't make the money for the company that they hoped, and they didn't do agile, like they weren't really lean about it. They just planned a huge project and then had developers build little pieces every 2 weeks or whatever, but they didn't actually find out, am I delivering something that's really going to be a profitable business, for us? So I think, product managers turn around really fast, so they're not really motivated. Okay, the quality's subpar. Who cares? I'm only going to be here a few years. Same with developers, okay, so I don't test everything the way that I want. Who cares? I'm only going to be here a few years. And that's definitely not the attitude I have, and I know listening to you, it's not the attitude that you have. But I've been just as surprised as you sometimes when I'm on projects and there's senior, people there, and they have no commitment to quality. And some of it, I think, too, though, is I'm just trying to be more realistic about, I came from a manufacturing like quality, that's where I started, right? That I started in that culture. Some of these other people who are developers, they're good people, and I think they mean well, but they were brought up in the, go to a coding boot camp, or, go watch some Pluralsight videos. And I think Pluralsight's great. I'm not knocking Pluralsight. But, to your point from earlier, I think there's a lot of education and energy spent in the industry on giving people tools to be good programmers and write, functional code in products, but that whole life cycle of all the disciplines around it to make sure that what you build is maintainable and tested and all that. I still think the software industry, for all the hubbub and buzz out there, is really immature in that area.
And the sad part is, because my thought process or my perspective is, because mainstream has this mindset, they're the same people that are deemed senior and project engineers. And right. So we pretty much learn bad habits because that's all we know, sure. Right? And the other part, which I think I heard in one of your videos, which I kind of disagreed with, but sure. I didn't comment on it on the thread, okay. Was that apparently, and I'm not trying to put myself on a pedestal, but apparently I'm one of very few developers that believes in I'm responsible for my education and my development as a professional engineer. There's been numerous times where full-time employees that I get brought in to help mentor and share alternative ways that may increase the success of a project. They believe that it's the boss's responsibility, or it's the company's responsibility to teach them how to be better developers. Mm. These companies aren't necessarily software companies. These companies are like insurance companies, retail companies or whatever, but every company has an IT side, right? Every right. company pretty much needs a developer to get some things automated and right. generate reports and stuff like that. But I think something that may contribute to, may or may not, but I think it's related, is the mentality of developers having this entitlement that, hold up, as far as I can see, we're all businesses. You're a business, I'm a business, and we hopefully market ourselves as being able to automate people's problems away. But you're selling your services to company XYZ as a professional software developer. Oh, by the way, you need to teach me how to build software professionally. Like, I'm not going to buy books on my own, right? but I expect you to buy me books. I expect you to bring me in a trainer to teach me how to build used software. That's how crazy this society is right now. But apparently I'm weird because I'm the only person that thinks that this is backwards. That we put the burden on the company that hired us to build them software to also teach us how to build them software.
Right.
So,
yeah. Well, I can share. I wouldn't say I disagree with that. I can just give you a couple thoughts on it because it's very. I mean, I can relate to it big time. I've said in some of my other videos, I was promoted to an architect at like 23 through a variety of weird circumstances, and I was way too young. I think from a coding standpoint, it was okay, but from a knowing how to lead people and work with people, I mean, hell no. I should not have been an architect. But, I ended up, I worked under this one boss who was really cool. And he would always get me these opportunities, but he'd always get himself in trouble because he and I were really, really passionate about software development and about products. And we would always put in, a lot of time training ourselves in our free time and learning about best practices. And he was always, he's the one who told me about Agile back in 2001, 99 or something, so he was always reading about kind of the latest management stuff. I was reading about technology. We were kind of partners. Really amazing guy. But I went to 2 or 3 companies after that where he was my boss at each of those companies. And I remember the 3rd company I was at, one of the gentlemen that was a programmer with me, basically my whole career up to that point, but he started as a junior dev. He was a co-op, then he became a senior engineer. And while I was working with him at this one company, he got promoted to be an architect, and he was working with me on that project. And I remember he was really frustrated with the other developers at that company because they just, it seemed like the patterns he would tell them to follow, they just had a really hard time grasping it. And, just basically the level of expertise and professionalism that he expected of himself, he was really frustrated that they didn't seem to exhibit the same thing. And I remember I told him, I think the hardest thing you're going to have about being an architect now, and you could apply this to a lead or anything, is letting go of the expectation that everybody else is going to be as passionate about it as you are. And I know that might sound like I'm saying,
it sounds like you're saying that it's okay for people not to have high standards.
No, I think
that's what I translated.
That's cool. That's cool. And I may just not be communicating it well. I think my intention was to say, I think and this is just my opinion, man, that's it. Yep. I think if your expectation on yourself is that you're going to hold everybody else to the same high standards that you hold for yourself, you're going to be very frustrated. Oh, and I only say that because I've been incredibly frustrated for probably a decade out of my career when I had that mindset. I was just constantly blaming everybody else for not holding things up to my standard. And I got to a point where I realized, okay, unless every team I work on, I can hire everybody and fire everybody, and they can listen to everything I have to say about the technical decisions that are made and the culture decisions, I'm going to have people that I have to work with that don't, live up to my maybe standards. And I think what that forced me to do, and it was not it was a painful process, was it forced me to really think again about, okay, I love software development, I love what I do, but do I love it so much that I'm willing to let it affect my personal life and change my personality where I'm getting, and this is just me, I was really angry and I was bitter and I was controlling and I basically was frustrated with everybody I would work with, 8 hours a day. And I just got to this point where I was like, I wasn't like, screw it, I'm just not going to care anymore. That's like the nihilism argument, right? Like the world is screwed up, so let's go, okay, I shouldn't go there. Like school shootings, right? That's a lot of times when you hear about the families with kids that are at school shootings, it's because those poor kids, they were bullied all the time. You know, they were treated really like crap, and they got to a point, you know, they had broken homes. And, you know, all of us have broken histories from, you know, one point or another, but where they just looked at it like, you know, well, the world's screwed, we might as well just take everybody else down with us. And, you know, I don't believe that. I still think, despite the flaws of most software companies, because they are, I think every single software company, every single software team is flawed in one or more ways. And so it's kind of like the challenge is, and it's just like life in general, the challenge is like, how do you still take pride in your work each day, do the best you can, but when you hit barriers or you hit people that aren't cooperating, kind of let yourself go, okay, well, I guess this is just, you know, something I've got to figure out how to work around or to accept, instead of like, oh, this person, like, what the hell's wrong with them? Because that's how I was before with everybody.
But this is the thing, Jamie. Like, I don't know about you, but
Sure.
I've been thrown under the bus before. And I felt it was unfair. And so I overcompensated the next time, where I'm like, okay, I get thrown under the bus, but none of this bubbled up before, you know, the project failed. You know, whenever recruiters would check in with management and see how, you know, Scott's doing, you know, oh, everything's good, everything's well, you know, but then once the project finally, like, you know, gets abandoned or something happens, oh, Scott, I don't know, he has this issue, that issue, you know, all the things bubble up. So what happened, right, and it has a direct effect on my personality, it does, is I went from, okay, I kept my head down and I just hammered away, yes sir, you know, always crack a smile, and just be a likable person, right, to, well, I don't want to be thrown under the bus anymore. And there's a lot of things that I kept my head down and still smiled, even though I didn't agree with some of the design decisions,
Sure.
strategies.
Sure.
And no matter what, I'm always going to be associated to that failed project. So thought process was, okay, well, you know what? I don't want to be associated to failed projects. This one's enough, right? I don't want to be associated to any more in the future. So I'm going to change my strategy. For now on, I'm going to be very vocal in what I disagree with. I'm going to write a dissertation and email people why I disagree with it. And not only do I disagree with it, but here's my approach to solving it, right? But that was the other extreme. All of a sudden, I went from keeping my head down, being someone that's pleasant to work with because I didn't cause a ruckus.
Sure.
I was just very passive, to being very vocal in things that I didn't agree with, and having the audacity to care. Why? Well, because I don't want to be thrown under the bus, so I'm going to document every single time I disagree with a decision that's made that I feel is going to contribute to a project not being successful. And now I'm in this other predicament where politics, everything, like, just, I don't know. It's, man. As soon as you start caring, as soon as you start being vocal about it, if you're not wearing the hat of architect, then you become someone that's difficult to work with because you dare to have standards. You dare to actually take it personal about where the project is going. And so it's like, damn if I do, damn if I don't. It's a catch-22.
Oh, man. All I can tell you, do I relate? Hell yes. Without sounding too doom and gloom, I mean, I've been, I'll use the word you used, thrown under the bus so many times at this point. It's like, I pretty much assume every project I start, there's probably a 50-50 chance it's going to happen. And the reason why I say this is because, you know, after working on so many projects, and I definitely went through the same thing you did, where I went from, really strong individual contributor and got, myself in some trouble for it, to really strong on the, like, I'm going to document everything. I'm going to make sure everybody agrees before we do stuff. I'm going to cover my butt to make sure I don't take the fall. And I got blamed unfairly, absolutely unfairly, for certain outcomes that the business or the teams didn't like in both situations. And, you can think of that as, well, screw it. I'm not going to do this anymore, right? And I mean, I think every one of us has those days, where we think, like, what is the point? I mean, but I guess I just have realized, and I've talked about this in some of my other videos, not real well, but I feel like the challenge in my career at this point is a couple things. One is to, like, not put my identity or my own value of myself in the outcome of the project so much. Meaning, like, let's say I start a project. I do the absolute best job I can. I work really hard to communicate well with people, to support everybody. I care about it. I'm not trying to do anything wrong. And just something unpredictable happens. Unpredictable stuff happens all the time, right? I hate this attitude of, we're going to bring experts in and they'll make sure nothing goes wrong. Sorry, things go wrong all the time on software projects. Well, I'm trying to have more this attitude that, like, when those things go wrong, and it was the coping with failing software projects video I did. I talked about this. Where like, when things go wrong, and if I get blamed, and at the end of the day, I got paid up until the point that happened. They can't take the pay they already gave, me away. Two, I used to think, if I disappoint one person, my career's damaged. They're going to spread my name everywhere. They're going to say all these bad things about me. Well, the reality is, people can go out and say, crappy things about me, and I didn't do anything wrong, and I can't stop them. There's all kinds of people out there that are nefarious, that want to, treat you unfairly, and you don't deserve it, right? So, like, I kind of had to get to a point where I'm like, I just have to be more fearless a little bit about, when I go into an engagement, I'm going to do what I know works. I'm going to be, nice to people, not to a fault, but to a point. I'm not a jerk, but also, everything you talked about, right? You know this. I can hear listening to you. You know how to run a successful project and bring it to completion. I mean, you obviously know everything you've talked about.
I know what not
to
do.
About. Yeah. But even with that, the amount of situations that we can get ourselves into, at least, in my experience, where something happens and somebody wants to make us take the fall for it. I just think I've gotten to a point where I've realized, like, there's only so much I can do to prevent that. And then I have to, at some point then, when that happens, because it sucks, right, when it happens, when you get thrown under the bus, I guess I have to have sort of the faith going forward that, look, this isn't the end of my career. This doesn't define me. Even if there's a bunch of people out on Twitter bitching about it, which, thank God, the projects that, there's issues with that they try to blame me for, that doesn't happen, right? But, I mean, I think about some of these big four companies and how people's, like, names publicly get, like, thrown all over the place. At the end of the day, I mean, I really feel like, whether you believe in karma or religion or, self-actualization or whatever you want to call it, like, if you try to do a good job and you do the best job you can and bad things happen, that doesn't mean you did anything wrong. It just means that you can't control the environment, and sometimes shit happens to good people. And I think it's easy for me to say that, because when you're in the heat of the moment of that going on, man, you're like, oh my God, this guy's coming for me, and this person's coming for me, and how do I stop this from happening, and are they going to think I did that? I mean, I've been there, right? I can't live my life that way anymore. I literally, like, I was miserable. I mean, I have 3 kids, and, I've been married for a long time, long story, but, I sacrificed a lot of time I could have spent with my kids when they were growing up, not because I was a deadbeat dad, but because I was so obsessed with making sure I didn't take the fall and doing a good job, because software development's so hard. And I literally just had to get to a point where I was like, enough's enough. You know, I got to be okay with like what I can do and what I can't do. And it's an ongoing journey, like to this day. I mean, this is not like, hey, Jamie's got it all together. You know, everybody listen to me and look up to this person who has a perfect approach for dealing with stress. Hell no. I struggle with it big time. But I feel like I've had some revelations this last year, especially, where I've just been like, life's too short. You know, if I'm going to continue to do this job, like, I gotta stop pretending I can prevent all this bad stuff from happening, because it just makes me nuts. It just does.
So this is what I've done. I'm not sure if the right term is to circumvent. I don't know if that's the right term or not, but to your point, I'm almost in the acceptance phase of some things are just going to happen that's beyond my control.
Right.
No matter what I do, Murphy's Law will find a way.
Oh, yeah.
And I just have to accept, and I'm not trying to be negative. So with that said, I'm saying, well, how can I protect my reputation, regardless of what it currently is? And I decided that I may be hired by a company, but I'll never be a slave to a company. But I will always be a servant of my industry. So, translated, my strategy for, regardless of if I get thrown under a bus, regardless of how many failed projects that I've been associated to, my strategy is to be undeniable. And what I mean by that is, okay, well, how can I be a servant of my industry? How can I be undeniable? Well, 2 weeks ago, I gave a talk on property-based testing at Awesomeness Software down here in South Florida. But make long story short, this is what I have to do. I need to maintain a technical blog, so it's undeniable that there are certain areas that I'm either familiar with or I'm the technical authority on. All right. For whatever reason, some people think that I may be hard to work with because, well, I say I have standards, right? I don't think it's asking too much to have automated tests, especially when the majority of the budget is consumed from debugging and troubleshooting versus actually like extending functionality. So with that said, I purposely like created a YouTube channel so I could document that I can have nice, enjoyable conversations with people that care. Right. And so, I mean, that's my strategy. I'm curious, like, if there's anything else you would recommend for me to protect myself by demonstrating that I'm a servant of my industry, and regardless of whatever project that I'm helping company XYZ with, I know my stuff. And stuff that I don't know, if I care about it enough, I'll know that too, right? And again, this is how I think I could preserve my career. What else do you think? What else do you recommend?
Man, I think your strategy already is really good. I really do. I think just like this video we're doing right now, you know, putting your thoughts out there where people can understand where you're coming from and how much you really care. This is just my opinion, but I think, you know, when you're getting hired as a full-time employee, or you're maybe trying to sell yourself as a consultant, and you're first hitting into those first few people that kind of weed you out just based on, you know, you send them your resume, right, or something like that. They're just looking at technology, and we all know that part of the hiring process just blows, right? It doesn't work very well. Weeds out a lot of really strong, great candidates, but it is what it is. But once you start talking to a hiring manager, or you're talking to, you know, people at a talk you do like you are, I think people are looking today more than ever before for real people that realize that despite all this technology and AI and all this stuff out there, there's still people behind the technology. And, you know, you're doing that. right? You know, I've watched a bunch of your interviews with other people, and when you have them on, you guys talk shop and you talk technology, but there's always a couple questions you end up getting into with that person where they reveal like a little bit about themselves, and you guys kind of go off on a tangent, and there's some little glimpses of cool stuff where you see, you know, how much you care and how much they care. And, you know, I've been learning this the hard way myself, just trying to put myself out there on YouTube and all over, you know, and this is just what my last video was about, right? Was like, you know, I thought, oh, I gotta, you know, if I'm going to help people online, they're not going to listen to me unless I establish myself as an authority. And, you know, I think people see through that these days, especially even companies now. You know, maybe, like I said, maybe the recruiters, not the hiring managers, maybe the recruiters and sort of the people right in the front door will throw you out if you don't have the right technical things. But, you know, when I was working for that consulting agency I worked for 10 years, I started to finally get really good at, they would bring me into pre-sales conversations, right? There'd be like salespeople that would meet, you know, here in Austin in Texas, you know, they'd meet business owners from all over, you know, all kinds of tech companies, healthcare companies, all kinds of companies. And they would eventually find out, you know, oh, you've got this technology problem. Hey, well, we've got people that can help you. And they would sometimes bring me along very early in the sales process to help them try to sell the solution. And before they would bring me in to do that, usually I would find, and I don't know why it would go this way, somebody would just tell me, hey, Jamie, you're going to start this project next week for, you know, company XYZ. And I'd go there and I'd find out, you sold them this, and it's supposed to be delivered by when, right? And all of a sudden I'd be obligated to this whole set of expectations. And when they started bringing me along into those, you know, pre-sales conversations, which is, I'm sure, very similar to you as an independent, you have to do some of this yourself. I started to realize, like, even though the salespeople wanted me to just, they'd be like, you're there as technical ammo, you know, let me do the sales talking and about their business. You just, you know, make them feel confident, you know, the technology. No, I mean, once I got to the point where I started to tell people straight out in those meetings before they've even signed to buy anything from us, hey, you know, I've done a lot of stuff. I know we can help you with this, but we're going to learn together that there's probably some things that you don't even know that are big problems with this approach. And we're not going to be able to figure that out until we get in there and start looking at it and things like that. And I think oftentimes we would win engagements or, you know, consulting contracts just because we were the only company, you know, because they'd be talking to a whole bunch of different companies, right, to bring consultants. And we're the only company that could just be straight with them and tell them, look, we're not telling you we can't do it. We're just not going to sell you this BS job that, like, because we're such great programmers and consultants, we can give you the exact level of certainty you want and all this predictability. And because, you know, if there's one thing that I really feel like is one of the core themes of this YouTube channel, it's that software development is super uncertain. And I mean, we all know that, right? Estimates are horrible. They're just crap. Like, it doesn't matter. I personally think, like, I've never gotten, the only time I find myself really good at estimating is if I'm doing something that's not worth much. You know, like, hey, come do some work for us in a technology that's 10 years old that everybody's been using for a while and get it to do something that's trivial. Oh, sure, I can estimate that. But how often do companies need that? Usually they're like, hey, can you build this thing that integrates with a system we've never used before, and also this other system, and also come up with this custom pattern that'll integrate them together and meet our performance requirements. Oh, and make sure you have the estimate within, 10% level of error. It's like, are you freaking kidding me? Who can do that?
I translate. When someone asks me to estimate something, they're asking me, hey, Scott, how much time is it going to take you to learn something that you haven't done before? And yeah, I know the technologies, right? I know the frameworks, but every software job for me is usually a custom job. So you're asking me, how long is it going to take for me to learn how to build this for you? Right? And it's just...
And that's why I'm saying... No, go ahead.
They just want a number.
Yeah.
So that they can pass it to, like, the higher-ups.
Exactly.
it's just a system that we're in until someone finally says enough.
And that's what I'm hoping through this YouTube channel. And I know I'm not the only one talking about this. There's some other guys I'm going to have on. I definitely will have you on again, too. This has been an awesome conversation. But, like, you know, people always say, you know, because I've done a lot of, like, agile coaching and stuff like that. I still mostly do dev. But, you know, people always say, if you don't get the leadership bought into what's different about agile development, then the whole game's off. And I really agree with that, because really agile development, you know, and people like to bitch that Scrum doesn't work, or Kanban doesn't work, or, you know, DevOps doesn't work, or, you know, the whole industry screwed up. And we could probably do a whole nother video where we could talk about the history of agile. That would be fun, actually. But I still personally think even Scrum, which is like over 20 years old at this point, I've been on projects where Scrum totally works, but it only works if the people who are expecting the deliverables to get to them are okay with finding out things are harder or take longer, and they don't commit things to their customer with some stupid fixed deadline that makes everybody on the team either work 80 hours a week to try to hit it, or like pull out everything they know about the project from, you know, best practices just to make them look good. And there's very few leaders, I think, who understand that if you're going to get into software development. I actually tweeted someone, and I don't remember what the original tweet was today, but I tweeted someone last night something related to this, where I basically said, you know, if you're a leader and you want to learn to be agile, if you don't have the courage to spend a lot of money, because software developers are expensive as heck, and find out that you're wrong and that your people are wrong, then, you know, run a food truck. Use that as a business to learn to be agile, because at least there, if you screw up your business or you deliver the wrong product, you know, your loss is much smaller. But, you know, we've got these people running these software businesses, or just businesses in general that build software, and they want, you know, complete certainty around a software product, and they don't get, you can't get complete certainty around a software product. It just doesn't happen. The only way that you get certainty around a software project is by a complete farce, meaning the developers are lying about what they've built. They haven't even finished everything just to say they're done, right? Or like, you know, people cut out quality or cut out scope, you know, in huge ways just to say that they did it originally. But I mean, I will actually say I have never been on a software project in 20 years where what was planned at the beginning was delivered for what it was estimated and scoped to. Ever. It always, you know, either it gets totally redesigned, you know. So basically my point is, I'm sorry, I'm kind of ranting. I'll shut up in a second here. But, you know, basically my point is, like, can we just stop as an industry pretending that we're going to find some solution that gives us certainty? Can we just all agree that, like, software development, we have to do it differently? We have to, like, from the top down to everybody's got to understand we're going to be wrong. We're going to be wrong. We're going to find out what we thought was right is wrong. And then what it gets down to is, how do people deal with when they're wrong? And that has nothing to do with dependency injection or continuous delivery or, you know, anything around technology. That has to do with how people treat each other, right? If you tell me you're going to do something and you go to do it and you find out you can't do it, now how am I going to treat you? Am I going to treat you like you don't know what you're doing, or am I going to treat you like, hey, let's figure out the way around this together. This just happens. This is software development, you know. And I mean, there are managers and leaders out there that get this. It's just this like tiny little percentage, right?
I'm curious if the frustration with Agile is my frustration with test automation. So specifically, have you ever assisted or provided guidance to a company that went from waterfall to Agile?
Oh yeah.
Okay. And have you ever experienced that their first time practicing Agile with real money at stake, right? With them not really performing their due diligence at home, doing their homework, going to talks, giving talks, etc. But everything is just on the job, in the ring, in front of everybody. Not rehearsals, but everything in the ring. Have you ever experienced where they had their first encounter with Agile, or practicing with it? Sorry, it didn't go as well, and as a result, they swore off Agile.
Oh my God! Hell yeah! Go ahead.
Okay, because what I mean by that is, I'm like a test automation supremacist, right? And so I'll go into shops, and if this is anything similar to test automation, developers will say, okay, well, I know this is the right thing to do. We should be writing, unit tests, whatever the definition of a unit test is. I'm not going to argue about that. So developers will be forced. They're told to do it. They don't want to do it. They're told to do it. They're forced by management, or pressured. That's a better word. Pressured by management to write tests as part of done criteria, or acceptance criteria. And usually what happens and I'm not preaching TDD, right? There's advantages and disadvantages, but what happens is developers, I'm getting to my point too. Developers will say, okay, I'm going to write the test later because, I really have to think about this. And I'm like, okay, but chances are, because you're programming in a OOP language, or object-oriented programming language, that doesn't have the constraints, where by default it's already testable, hence functions, what's going to happen is, one, you don't practice outside of work, right? And they hired me to teach you how to write tests. And because this is our first time, or really your first time, even though you're a senior developer, but you don't know how to write testable code, this is what's going to happen. You guys are going to write 50 tests, maybe even 100 tests. And sooner or later, when you start having more tests that you need to maintain, and there's changes and requirements, all of a sudden, you're not going to be able to keep up with the tests. One, because you never read books on modern practices of how to engineer tests. And what's going to happen is you're going to use this as an opportunity to not hold yourself accountable for what you should already know, because this has been around for probably 20 years, but you're going to blame the practice in your very first time attempting this practice on their budget, on their time, right? And you're going to convince management that unit tests are costly, right? Now, I'm making like an analogy because I think it's going to be the same thing towards Agile. I have to consistently remind. Sorry, I'm getting amped about this. I'm turned up. But
go for it, dude.
I have to consistently remind these 50-year-old, 100-year-old, maybe not 100, but these Fortune 500 companies, sometimes Fortune 100 companies, that, okay, first of all, if you really want to be agile, then you really should revisit the Agile Manifesto, because right now you are not putting people over frameworks or processes, right? Revisit the Agile Manifesto, and let's have a conversation about what we're truly following and what we're not following. And I guarantee you that the majority of companies that are trying to make this transition, or still struggling with this transition, they are not familiar with the manifesto itself. What they are familiar with is people coming in selling snake oil that don't even program themselves, but they're going to teach you how to be agile, but they never programmed, right? So I'm done with my rant.
No, man, I appreciate that. That's legit. I mean, I think whether it's just, my opinion, I think whether it's, trying to get a company to do agile, or do, test automation better, or, maybe put DevOps in, or any change where you're going to change the behavior of people, What I find is there's well, there's a lot of stuff we could talk. We're almost at an hour now. We could we're definitely going to do this again, by the way.
Yeah.
But I either find people don't want to do it because they just really just are lazy. Okay, let's be honest. Some people they're just lazy, right? They're like, I got enough of a degree to get this job. I'm making a ton of money. I'm just going to friggin' coast, right? Some people are like that. And you know, those people, there's not a whole lot you can do. Well, there is, but there's a lot of depth to that. But there's other people, and I think you touched on this, where they may want to do better testing, or they may want to write better user stories, or write better, you know, acceptance criteria, or, you know, they may want to do all these things that they haven't done before. But once they start doing it, they realize, woo, I you know, listened to Scott, and he sat with me and, you know, showed me how to do it, and I watched these videos, and now I'm actually doing it, and I'm realizing, man, like, the gap between like me knowing it and getting to like Scott's level is way bigger than I thought. And then they have to make a decision. Are they humble enough to reach out to you and go, hey, Scott, I really need help. I actually realize this testing thing's a lot harder than I thought. Can you help me? And maybe even help me talk to my manager so he can understand like that I'm not just like a crappy programmer. I just need more time. And some people though don't do that. They immediately jump to I'm going to blame. Okay, yeah. In your experience, and I've seen both, but you know, some people their first thought is, how can I blame something else than the fact that I don't know this? And you know, again, God, I sound like a broken record, but this all gets down to people and relationships, because I think if you're working with a developer and you've never worked with them before and you're going to get them to do test automation, you know, it's really the strength of your relationship and how much they trust you and how much they feel that you're not just there getting them to do what you want them to do so that you can be successful, but that you actually want them to be successful too. I think if people don't get that vibe from me, they're like, I could care less, Jamie. You can come in here and be like the greatest developer under the sun and management loves you. I don't care about you because you don't care about me, you know? And so it sucks. It takes, I mean, I'm not trying to pretend I do this perfectly myself. I struggle with it. But like, I've really had to go, man, how do I go into these projects where management tries to say everybody will bow to my will because they're paying me so much and they've gotten buy-in when I know better? I know these are people. I know they're capable of dragging things way longer than they need to if they don't like me. And it took me, you know, a decade of consulting, failing at this over and over again, or just, you know, trying to learn this until I think I started getting through my thick skull like, I got to actually tell management, yeah, we're going to deliver this stuff for you, but I need to get to know your people, you know, and exactly. I need to take them out to lunch and not just like, hey, we're going to go out to lunch one time. I need to like actually really get to know them, because the thing that happens is as soon as stuff gets hard, our relationship is going to be the deciding factor. And most companies, they don't want to hear that. They just want to hear, look, we gave you authority, just go make the change. If they don't want to do it, we'll force them to. I mean, you know just as well as I do, you can't force a developer who wants to be lazy to do something. You can't. They
Especially
will make...
if they have domain knowledge.
Yeah. Oh, and there's that too, right? The job security thing.
And they understand how things were hacked together.
Right. Right.
So I've been there, and like in a way, I kind of feel guilty for me coming off ranting, but
it's how you feel. You can't help how you feel.
Is it really ranting if someone is in love with what they do? Like, I think it's more of like counseling, right?
Yeah.
So
no, I just want to. I mean, this is just my opinion, but like, I think you should never lose that passion that you have for excellence and that passion you have for just caring about the code and about the product. I think if you can find a way, and I hope you don't take this the wrong way, if you can find a way to channel a little bit more of that into the people that you work with, and I'm not saying you don't do that at all, so I hope you don't take this the wrong way, but like, you're going to just do amazing things in your career. Because, I mean, dude, you've got the skills. It doesn't matter if you've been on field projects before. You know, I have too. You know, you're continually growing. You're building up the community. You've got a YouTube channel. You know, you got a lot of really great things to say. You got a lot of insight. When you go on projects, if you can, you know, just work on, and I'm saying this because I'm kind of telling myself the same thing, you know, finding a way to just shift a little bit of that more towards helping people that aren't there yet, you're going to, you know, be, God, 10 times more effective than you even are. And it's just my opinion, you know, and I don't want it to come across like I'm saying you aren't good with people. I haven't worked with you personally. I'm sure you are. I'm just encouraging you, you know.
So like, I get along with people that really do care, and period. And if you really care, that doesn't mean like I only get along with like project engineers. That means like
Right.
I get along with like junior developers. We can't ignore the fact that humans are very biased. That's the way that we're designed. We're
Absolutely.
designed to stereotype. We're
Yep.
designed to defend our decisions.
Yes.
Even if, in hindsight, if we knew a little bit more, then we probably would have not made those decisions.
Right.
And so, I mean, let's speak truth. The majority of these software shops are similar to prisons, right? It's male dominated. There's usually an alpha within it, and it's just politics is heavily involved, and that's something that I really haven't invested my time in. I don't want to, but it's something that is required. And like, as I said offline, like one of my mentors, once I started like making money, of course not the type of money you make, but once I started making money, one of my mentors was like, Scott, I gotta break it to you, you know, the more money you make, the more of a politician you have to be. And
That was great.
that has been the truth.
I think that is
And
true.
it's something that I feel like I can't opt out of. It comes with it, you know. And so that's the part where I'm still trying to like understand how to operate. And the biggest thing, and I know that I touched on it earlier, is I'm tired of being part of failed projects.
Tell me about it.
That's it. Like,
I know.
so that's it.
Well,
I'm trying. It feels
Yeah.
good having a normal conversation
Yeah.
with someone else that cares.
For sure.
I'm a cool person to talk to.
for sure. And, you know, I hope those of you out there watching this, I hope what you take away from this is not like, oh my God, you know, the software industry is horrible. Get out. You know, I think, you know, you could share what you'd like, but what I'd like people to get out of this is that when you think the coding part's hard, there's this whole other part of software development that you know is not being taught in schools very well, and you know, it really gets down to, there's some unique things, I think, you know. I actually saw this comment. I started posting on this site called dev.to some of my videos, just the last 3. And one of them, my videos was called Healing the Rift Between Programmers and Managers, and it was just kind of a story video. But there was a guy who came in and left a comment and said, you know, the same exact dynamic exists between line managers and workers, like in manufacturing plants. I think he was talking about manufacturing plants. And I thought it was cool, and I thanked him for it. And I do think a lot of these like power struggle dynamics are in a lot of other industries. I think the thing that's especially hard about it in software development is because we're paid so much. When you really think about it, we are paid very well. And so like one thing, this is just me, I've had to get to a point to is, and this is like the last video I was talking about, I make enough money. You know, who wouldn't like to retire early or have even more money? Sure, but honestly, I'm comfortable. I mean, not right now. I need to get a job right now. Actually, I'm looking for something. But, in general, the amount of money I make, I'm very comfortable. Could I even be more comfortable if I actually needed less money and I didn't have to deal with the politics? So, I mean, I think that's like the thing, and we'll continue to talk about this on this channel, but I think that's the thing that everybody kind of has to make a personal decision for themselves. Like, when do I say I want to keep dealing with the difficult politics just to make a little bit more money versus, I'm okay now. Like things aren't perfect, but I make a good salary and at least I don't have to deal with VPs all day. I mean, there is a place for that too, and that's okay for some people, and like I said, I'm not trying to tell anybody what to do at all. That's a personal decision for everyone, right?
A famous book author within the software industry told me that, said, Scott, I hate to break it to you, this is someone different.
Okay.
That shops start taking you seriously usually when you publish a book that is industry accepted. And so Michael Feathers told me that. And he said, publish a book or be a recognized conference speaker.
Sure.
Then people start listening to you, and there's repercussions if they don't. Hence, if the employees don't, and that's a higher level. I'm not sure if I want to write a book, but
yeah, me too.
That's what I've been told.
Me too. I mean, I think down the road, depending on what comes out of this channel, I'll probably have to find a way to offer a book or a short course or something just to make it a little easier to consume than, however many videos this is eventually going to turn into. But I think that's good advice. And I think that's probably true as far as, establishing yourself in the industry. That's probably really good advice. But hey, man, it's been about an hour. I mean, honestly, you and I could probably talk for 2 more hours, really. Just when we were talking before even this video, I was like, we got to talk more. Like I definitely connected good with you and like we could get into a lot more detail. So I'll make sure, like, let's stay in contact. I want to help you out, growing your channel too. Yeah, if you haven't checked out Scott's channel, just search for his name out there. And, obviously, if you haven't subbed to mine, you can consider subbing to it. I'm still putting new stuff out all the time, figuring this out. But you want to leave any parting thoughts, or?
Oh, well, I appreciate it.
Of course.
My internet name is Bizmonger.
Well, that's right.
And
on Twitter, I saw that.
That's how you find me on pretty much anything, whether it's my technical blog, my YouTube channel, which, honestly, like, maybe a couple years ago, my YouTube channel was like basically interviewing other people, not really interviewing, but having conversations with other people that were like industry recognized. But lately, I've been experimenting with, for me, a new way of studying, really like training my subconscious so that I literally like practice building software,
I've
live
seen that.
streaming. And it's amazing because when I have interviews, I just go into autopilot. I literally don't have to think as much. I just start talking, and things just make sense because it's been done before. So, yeah, I appreciate the shout out, and that's it. If there were a message to get by, I would say, unfortunately, I hope it changes, but I still love building software, and I've said on Developer on Fire, what clicked for me, even though I think I hit my salary cap, but I still want to challenge that, is the more I learn, the more I demonstrate what I've learned, the more money I make, the more value I can deliver. And that's kind of the rules that I operate by. So that's it.
That's awesome, man. I will just say, I'll leave you with one little nugget. Regardless of what you're a cool person. And don't forget about, if people realize it or not, I've had to learn this more about myself. When you're building that relationship with someone else, at the end of the day, you've got stuff to offer other than just the technology. And that's what keeps people together and really gets people to trust you. And I think we forget about that as developers sometimes. Yep. So no, it was awesome, man. Thank you so much for being on the channel.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it. All right, take it easy, Scott.